Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd.
As business attorneys for healthcare practices, we meet a lot of interesting people and learn their amazing stories. This season's theme is What Now? Each episode will involve a real client story with a high-pressure moment for that practice.
With the theme being What Now, Michael, I kind of feel like asking you, what now?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Brad.
No.
I read an article recently about impersonators. It was called Monetizing Being a Doppelganger.
Well, I do love a good impersonator, so I'm very interested in how we can monetize this.
Of course, the article led with the most frequently impersonated star, the king himself. Elvis impersonators are earning as much as $129,000 a year.
Wow, that's not a bad gig, impersonating the king and earning over 5 figures. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah.
Oh,
And apparently, according to this article, if you look like a famous A-lister, you can earn between $500 and $10,000 for a single appearance at a corporate event or private party.
Maybe I should start working on my impersonations.
Well, yeah, I don't know, Brad. You need to look like someone first that's famous.
Oh.
A-lister. I'm working on it, but it probably won't be a compliment. And then have you heard in the article, they also noted a different thing. Do you know do you have a guess on the appearance fee for a top cover band?
Cover band. So this is not the real band, right?
Right.
10 grand?
Well, according to the article, Brit Floyd, a Pink Floyd cover band, lists their appearance fee between $35,000 and $50,000.
Okay. Apparently I need to learn how to sing too.
Yeah, they even have impersonators on social media. But the article notes that you have to be careful here. You have to watch out for the ones that are trying to bilk you out of money, pretending to be somebody they're not.
Well, so for $50,000 for a band impersonating other band, that's not bilking them? Tell me more, Michael.
Yeah, I guess they get around it through disclosure or I don't know. I don't have an answer for you there. But do you think you have shot at making money as any type of impersonator? And if so, who would you be?
In shocking news, as an extrovert, I have actually worked on a lot of different impersonations. I don't know if I'll be a doppelganger, but the one that was easiest back in the late 80s, early 90s is I can impersonate Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly from Back to the Future. I kind of looked like him back when I was skinnier and younger. How about you?
Unfortunately, Brad, my internal confidence does not seem to line up with reality. I have not received feedback that I look like anyone famous, even though in my own mind I do. And I definitely do not have the energy or talent to impersonate someone. So I think it's a dead end for me.
I agree with your internal confidence that you should not try to impersonate anyone.
All right, let's jump into today's story.
Okay. Go for it, Michael.
All right, before we start, Brad, I do not want any impersonations coming from you during the story.
I make no promises, Michael.
I'm very scared. Okay, but I did do this to myself if I cause you to do it.
Okay.
Our story today is about a person I met at a conference.
Okay.
She had heard us talking about medical spa business and compliance challenges. She heard both of us when we were together on a panel. But
did she mention how much better I was than you?
No, she came to talk to me. I was just about to
she
say
was
that.
intimidated by me, is what I'm hearing.
Yes. So she's based in South Carolina.
Okay.
Her name is, Brad, no singing, Julie McCoy.
Okay. You cannot say her name and immediately not hear the theme of the TV show The Love Boat, but I will not sing it today in fear that the audience will stop watching our show.
Okay, and you're growing up a little bit. I'm
trying,
amazed. Okay, so Julie met with me after speaking, like I said, and because she felt like the medical spa and wellness center she had started with her husband was in deep trouble. And the name of the business we'll call Titanic Medical Spa and Wellness Center.
Well, Michael, with a name like that, I don't think it has much trouble. It sounds like it has a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need a little more context, which is probably ironic coming from me.
Oh, Brad, it's music to my ears. I love when you ask for context. So I will give you some context.
Thank you.
Julie is the business person
Okay.
who decided to support her husband, a physician, when they started the Titanic. We'll call his name Doc.
All right. Another character from the Love Boat. But you're starting to confuse me, Michael. I mean, I'm not the smartest person on this podcast, but Love Boat and Titanic, there are two different things happening here, Michael.
Yeah, well, I will agree you're not the smartest person on this podcast.
I was just helping you out there.
Glad you asked. Okay, well,
Trying to build up your confidence.
I'll
by
give
the way.
you some confidence
Okay.
or some props.
Okay.
Your 80s TV memory's on point.
Good.
As usual.
Yep.
Yes, Brad, the Doc was named is the name of the character who played the ship's doctor on the Love Boat. So Doc, in our story, has been an internal medicine doctor employed by a local hospital for a long time.
Okay. Well, and for audience members who are not familiar with your typical physician who's employed by a hospital, it's pretty common, especially if in the primary care world, where most either with a big group or with a local hospital system. And generally speaking, it's really more like a 9-to-5 job, quote unquote, for a physician, where that's your employer. You go work for them every day. And you're seeing patients either through the clinic or at the hospital itself.
Yeah, and then for those that want a little bit under the hood, there's a lot of technicality that goes with being a quote hospital employee because, and this will vary state by state, but there are issues with a hospital actually W-2 employing a physician, and so there will be these physician groups that are connected closely to the hospital that really serve in that purpose. They're we call them hospital employees.
Yep.
So Doc had a vision that this small community they lived in needed an aesthetic and wellness center.
Okay. So we established he was employed by the hospital. Was he then allowed to open up some side hustle? I guess let's jump back to what does his contract say with the hospital?
Yeah, it's a really important question. So oftentimes employment agreements will have what we call moonlighting clauses that govern what types of outside activities, if any, a doctor can do. So apparently in this case, Julie explained that the hospital was supportive of them going forward, or particularly her husband, Doc, going forward with Titanic Medical Spa and Wellness, as long as it didn't interfere with his day job.
Well, I think if the hospital knew the name of the Titanic Medical Spa and Wellness, of course they were supportive because they knew that this practice, Michael, would sink.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you're taking a little too literally, Brad. But okay, I follow. So back to the story.
Okay.
Doc had done some deep research, and he had concluded that the brand needed to be upscale in order to be successful. He wanted to garner the trust and reputation of the community for, in his mind, instant success. He was going to come in with this really tight, nice branded product and be able to leverage his community of patients through being a hospital employee and reputation in the community, and they were going to come flocking. He figuratively built a Titanic, Brad. It was upscale in a huge space so that there would be plenty of room to grow.
Hearing this, I'm starting to imagine a giant iceberg floating towards this practice. This sounds very costly, Michael. How much did this cost?
Yes, Brad. I'm starting to sweat a little bit as I talk, reliving this conversation. Julie shared that they had borrowed $500,000 for the finish out.
The finish out.
Yes. And it was a beautiful space.
Well, for $500,000 that they borrowed, it has to be pretty impressive. So for audience members who are not as familiar, like if you're finding a space, there's a couple of months that go by where you're trying to find the right space, then some negotiations back and forth. Eventually you do sign everything. And so that can be anywhere from 6 to 12 months from when you start the process. But like step-wise, the very first step is really working on that letter of intent. A good letter of intent for your lease is you're really thinking about What are the economics of this? Do they make sense? That's where either your attorney or your commercial broker can kind of negotiate that piece. And that will kind of then bleed right into the actual lease. Hopefully you had all the business terms correctly, and there's some back and forth on that. And then where you were kind of hitting on was that eventually will go, you're meeting with somebody to help design the space. So he was saying he wanted to look like the Titanic. So I guess it had red carpet and giant red stuff all over. I don't know. I think that's what the Titanic's supposed to have. But anyway, all this being said is you eventually get to the point where construction starts. And in your typical lease, they're going to give you TI, which is tenant improvement, meaning they build into your cost that. So that means that not only did they build it into the lease for the audience staying with it, but then you said they spent an additional $500,000. So the landlord said, okay, here's some money to build out your Titanic-looking awesome space. And then they went well above that by $500,000. So that's a lot of money for a space.
Yeah, and I don't know. I didn't, because we didn't represent Julie and Doc, I don't know exactly, how much allowance they got and all those details. But going through your timeline and what it looks like to go rent space, I mean, Doc made decisions that influenced that $500,000 at the beginning. So when you pick out the space at the beginning and the square footage, of course, the bigger it is, the more that's going to influence the potential finish out costs that you spend, not to mention your rent. And then as you get into, like you said, the kind of design phase of it, that's where they probably really were working on that red carpet, as you said, but the branding to really make it fancy. And then it still can continue in the actual construction phase, because at that point, you may be doing add-ons and change orders, as they say, to, kind of your ideas keep adding on and you're running up a bill as you're doing it.
Yeah.
I will say, Brad, I started sweating a little when she was talking to me. And then, of course, this was in context, her starting the conversation that she thought her business was in trouble.
Yeah, I'm starting to sweat a little bit too, just hearing all this, just thinking about when we went through our 3 builds at this firm.
Yeah.
We did not go 500,000 audience members over budget. In fact, we did go over budget, so that's kind of good. All right, let's go back to, we've now know they're in trouble, but it's a medical practice, as you said. So what medical services were they providing there?
Yeah, they plan to capitalize, as I mentioned earlier, on Doc's patient base. So they really wanted to be grounded in offering a suite of wellness services. So weight loss, HRT, other kind of women's health related services. Okay.
And so audience members understand this Doc is coming from being a primary care physician. And as a primary care physician, this is a huge shift in what he's used to. So he's going into the wellness space, and we know in the wellness space, that's really about episodic care, meaning that you're thinking of forward-looking, not after the fact. Primary care, you come in, have a cough, I don't feel good, versus what are the things we can do from a cash upfront, membership-driven type of plan where we're fundamentally changing your health based on some wellness routines or prescription drugs. What a lot of people don't realize is they're coming into this market as they introduce wellness. You have to be really careful about how you're then promoting yourself, right? Because if you're saying, come here and we're going to offer these things and you live longer or lose weight, be very careful on the marketing side, again, because we're now taking cash, we're thinking things differently. And again, from his perspective, he's probably used to having the hospital run his payers and everything like that. Now we have operational aspects that they have to start thinking about. What are the protocols they have, and who's going to be touching the patient? What kind of training documents they have? How are they managing these patients? And I think all this really kind of brings back to knowing everything. What do they put in place so that when there were some type of unintended consequences that pop up, what do they have in place from a contract, from staffing, from compliance? Obviously, there's a lot of information to think about, but he's coming at it from being an employee at a hospital system. So hopefully they went through a lot of these layers as they were getting ready to open, besides building out the Taj Mahal of the medical practice.
No, you're right. I mean, what he has going for him is that he has the training to, kind of graduate into these kind of elective wellness services. But, it's different going into elective medicine and treating kind of the way you're saying you're not treating a problem. You're trying to create wellness, and so I don't know how much that part of it affected him, but we know that it's possible because obviously they weren't doing well, and it's also possible that his lack of business experience by being an employee affected things as well. So those are all good points, and how what integrating the services could have affected their current state of things.
And based on the medical services you were describing, and then thinking about what you said, I mean, it said it was a huge space. Why did they need that much space, Michael?
I was curious about it as well. I mean, these are mostly prescriptive services.
Yeah.
And but Julie did actually answer that for me when she shared that they filled the space.
Oh, good.
By investing in another $500,000 in lasers and other aesthetic devices. And they borrowed for this as well.
Okay, audience members, I'm not going to do the math here, but it's 500 here, 500 there. Eventually, that's going to start adding up, it sounds like, Michael. But for those who don't realize, like, when you go out and buy a large piece of equipment, so these lasers and other machines, I mean, they could be 100,000, 200,000, 20,000 here, 50,000 here. So obviously, there was a ton of machines they were buying. But once you buy it, it's yours. I mean, period. The only time you can ever return it is if it doesn't work, and they're just going to replace it with one that hopefully does work, generally speaking, if it's still on a warranty, et cetera. But that's a giant commitment, audience members, because first off, they don't have a patient yet, period. And they don't know what their patients need. And so going out and buying a $500,000 worth of equipment, that can quickly become, giant coat racks or paperweights, depending on the size of it.
Yeah, pretty expensive ones at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I think I was doing the math a little bit before that, but it sounds like they've already spent at least $1 million that we know of just to kickstart this thing. I'm stressing out, Michael.
Yeah. Well, let me give you your props again, Brad. You did add successfully 500,000 plus 500,000 to get to $1 million.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't realize I did that. I kind of blacked out.
Yeah. It was impressive. So Julie explained that because they were cash strapped, she helped her husband out, and that they had not hired any other employees.
Did she handle like the operations and sales, Michael?
Yes, Brad, she did.
Okay.
And as it turns out, she was handling all the treatments as well. Because remember, Doc had a day job.
Julie is, I think you said in the beginning, so was the business person. I don't believe you said she was a provider, right? And we're in South Carolina, right?
You got it, Brad. Yep. She would be what they would consider a unlicensed person. And as it turns out, in South Carolina, that's a no-no. You can't be delegated medical treatments. And so, if I was sweating at the beginning, just listening to the financial strain, I was really about having to catch my breath when I was listening to her talk about, the fact that she was running these devices and treating the patients while her husband was across the street, at his day job.
At this point, Michael, I just want to say I'm very happy that she came and talked to you after the speech, because first off, she's probably delaying me getting the bar. But second, if I got to the bar, I'd be buying her shots, because it would just be that upsetting. And I think one of the things that, hearing with it, that she was utilizing machines, unfortunately, audience members, sometimes you go to these trade shows and the salespeople, who we love, they're great people, always go to the bar with the salespeople. They're a lot of fun, great stories. But the salespeople are going to tell you, oh, don't worry, Doc, I can train anyone to use this machine. And that's probably 100% correct. But you just mentioned something earlier, is she was not a licensed person, and that's a big red flag in most, not all states, but most states, and South Carolina being one of them, that RNs or higher, the only people to touch, can do medical services.
The good news was that's actually what gave her the bravery to come and talk to me after the speech, as she heard us talking about kind of scope of practice. And as it turns out, when she started talking, she just kind of went immediately to the financial distress of the Titanic.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a lot of I guess, water analogies that we've been using when we talk about the soap throughout the season. And we have the Titanic, we have Julia McCoy, we have Doc. So let's bring it back in the framework for this season on the what now. Were they acting like a pirate, a Navy SEAL, or a cruise director?
Well, they started out acting like cruise directors, but shifted into pirate mode when they started having financial pressure. So I guess to give some context, Brad, why don't you first remind the audience, how do cruise directors act?
Cruise directors are about being buttoned up, right? They want to minimize their risk, and they believe by having a whole bunch of checklists and looking at everything and checking off each one of those boxes, that they're putting themselves in a good position. So the idea is, if in reality, a cruise director, you get on a boat, and the boat sails, and it can't really change course at all because it's already, this is where we're going. We're going to this port, and the cruise director is to make sure you get on and off the boat. So it's all about A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and there's no deviating from that at all.
Okay, now to remind the audience again about how do pirates act.
Awesome. I mean,
well, yeah, it's fun.
Yes,
we all agree. And
being pirates are fun. They're high energy. They're moving fast. They're breaking things. But they're kind of throwing caution to the side. The complete opposite as a cruise director, because they're really, if there is risk, they don't even focus on it because they're moving super fast and they're really enjoying the energy of just being free and making decisions as they go without really any compliance or other business risk.
So let's kind of connect it. So at the beginning, Julie and Doc, Doc had a vision through his research of what he wanted this to look like. Mm-hmm. And then he built it immediately. And so it's like it's like he had a plan, but it wasn't really connected to reality. And so, he just went and did all these things without kind of pressure testing it against, the financial situation. Mm-hmm. And then when they had financial pressure and couldn't afford to hire people, they shifted into pirate mode, and it was pure survival. Like, someone's got to do this and there's no one who can. So Julie, gets the training to, run these devices, and it's truly going fast and breaking things. And really probably wasn't that fun because they were desperate and it was in survival mode and they were just doing what they had to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. It was not the fun aspect of pirate mode. It's just the survival aspect of pirate mode, that you're pivoting left and right, but not sure why you're going different directions. But I think we got to go to what do you think?
Go to break? Yeah. On the other side, after break, let's talk about the mess that Julie and Doc have with the sinking Titanic Medical Spa and Wellness Center.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
Well, welcome back to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, my co-host, Michael Byrd. Now, Michael, for those that don't remember, this season, our theme is What Now? And we've been exploring a fascinating but scary story that's making us sweat about a med spa that truly is a sinking ship. We went real into depth about the story, Michael. So instead of, I think the next step really, what is the biggest risk that you've pulled from the story so far?
The biggest iceberg?
Yeah.
There's a lot happening. You have to start with scope of practice.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that they switched into pirate mode and that Julie was treating patients. The consequences of starting to act like a pirate is that you're in a bet your license scenario at this point, because we're not talking about bankruptcy. We're not talking about all these other things that are in of themselves not great things, obviously.
No, yeah.
But, if Doc can't, support the family and continue his career at the hospital, it's a completely different thing. And let's be clear, the primary risk is on Doc as the licensed physician who is allowing this, his wife, who's not a licensed provider, to provide these treatments. And really, there's no way to minimize that risk. I mean, yeah, you might have processes and oversight and all these things, but the moment the board gets a hold of it, or the moment a patient gets hurt, all the focus is going to be on the fact that you have an unlicensed person touching that patient.
I totally agree with you, and I think you're right. That's a big trap that they're in right now. Is that they're not even paying attention to the scope of practice, the supervision rules that come with that. But Michael, let's keep moving. What else did you learn?
So to add on to the compliance risk, there's a hidden risk that we haven't really talked about. So remember, Doc's primary practice is, well, actually, I don't know how much we talked about this, but it's fully an insurance-based practice. They have
pretty common for a hospital.
Yeah. So it's private insurance and federal payers. So Brad, I'd love for you just to briefly, I don't want to get too deep into it, but talk about the contractual risk of offering overlapping services on, a cash basis at the Titanic, and then potentially these same patients being on insurance plans, with Doc at the other practice at his day job.
Yeah.
And the risks that go with that.
Absolutely. And this is the part where a lot of people don't even think about it is, if you have a contract, in this case, the hospital and or / the physician via this contract, you're saying when a patient comes in with this particular need, I will take care of them and they will pay a deductible or a copay or whatever it is that's associated with that. The moment that same patient is either referred or finds you across the street and you come in and they want to have a service done, the question is, and you're saying I'm cash only now over here, but you're still taking insurance over here. There can be a lot of conflict there, whether meaning that this patient actually would have been covered under Medicare had they gone to the hospital, but because they went across the street and they're paying you cash, you're now actually in violation of that contract. And or commercial payer, where the commercial payer, especially with hormone replacement, would have taken care of that under that model instead of cash. So it's a really big friction of an area that you have to be very mindful of if you're still working full time and being paid by program payers like Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, and commercial payers. So that's the first thing I noted. And then the last piece, real quick, is we didn't mention this, but is your malpractice insurance still covering you? So most of the time when you're working for the hospital, your malpractice insurance is covering you while you're there. But the moment you walk across the street, in this particular scenario, hopefully they have all the proper coverage for everything that they're doing, including the doc and his employees, which is one person right now.
And then I'll just say, the trying to unpack their risk on the financial side, they borrowed $1 million, and there's a good chance that they signed what's called personal guarantees,
PGs,
and on both of those loans. So, on that side, if the business doesn't make it, they're likely Doc and Julie's personal assets are exposed. And so it just, becomes so important to not, of course, plan appropriately, but also understand what your risk is when you're, when they're handing out money like candy.
Yeah. Well, Michael, we're almost out of time. So I have 2 follow-up questions. 1, what happened to Julie, Doc, and the Titanic? And 2, what are some final thoughts?
I don't know if they made it. I do know I believe they fixed their compliance problems, because Julie I was in brief communication with her afterwards, and I know she stopped immediately being involved in the treatments, and they brought in appropriately trained providers, but have lost touch. Don't know if they made it financially. And then as far as final thoughts go, acting like a cruise director, it feels like you're doing the right thing. There is intentionality there. You're building something, and you think you're safe. But acting like a cruise director can sometimes disregard situational awareness. Like, you're a startup and you don't have any patience yet. And so,
And you borrowed $1 million.
yeah, you need to build some strategy to get there instead of just going to the end immediately. And when you're, it's really easy when you're a startup, if you're acting like a cruise director, to create too much complexity for what you need at that point.
Totally agree. Well, audience members, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. But don't worry, we'll be back next Wednesday when we will discuss my practice founder died. Ooh, what now? Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.